Namaste and welcome to Detours with me, Anuradha Goyal, where I talk to some very interesting personalities about journeys of all kinds. Namaste and welcome to Detours. Today we have Preeta Raut ji with us. She's an independent researcher and she goes by the name Global Odia on social media, and she shares some beautiful snippets of one of the most culturally rich states of India. And she's been researching on the history of Kalinga, which is one of the many names of Odisha. And she's going to talk to us about traveling traders of Odisha. Odisha has had a long history of maritime trade with Southeast Asia and other regions as well. So we are going to pick Preeta's brain and learn a little bit about Odisha today. Preeta, welcome.
Namaste, Anuradha ji. Namaste, everyone. Thank you for having me on your podcast, your channel. It is a privilege and honor speaking to you. Thank you.
So, Preeta, let's dive into the maritime trade of Odisha and tell us who were these traders. Who were these traders who were trading with the rest of the world? I know you, in one of your conversations, you mentioned they are called Sadhabas. So tell us who these Sadhabas are.
So the Sadhavas of Kalinga, or as we say in Odia, Sadhava, the Kalinga Sadhava, they were a group of people who did trade via the maritime route. They were the merchants or seafarers who conducted trade and commerce via the oceans and the Indian Ocean and the Bay of Bengal that we call right now. So as you know, in India, they're like trade has always been there, since time immemorial, like with caravans and land trade routes, and even through sea, we have heard about the Indus Saraswati civilization, the traders going to different places. So Odisha, being a coastal state on the eastern part of India, Odisha presently as Odisha, the geographical extent. But when we say Kalinga, Kalinga is the ancient name of Odisha, and not just present day Odisha. Kalinga used to, it was a region which was from almost some of the parts of present day West Bengal, because of Tamranepti area, till the Ganga Godavari delta, the basin. So this entire region was the Kalinga region. It's not just a geographical entity or a political boundary type of a region, but the people who inhabited here were of different types. They spoke different languages, they followed different faiths, they came from different communities, they had different types also within them sometimes, but they all identified as of belonging to Kalinga. So the Kalinga traders, the Sadhavas, were not one community, like they didn't just go from by one caste, but they were a very motley crew of like people from different castes did trade. Trade was open to every sort of person, like whoever had the means and the strength and the bravery, or the that daredevil attitude, or that enterprise in them. They could take their ship, or they could gather a crew of people who could man those ships and take the natural resources that Kalinga was always famous for to the far off regions in Southeast Asia mostly. So these were the Kalinga Sadhavas. They were the traders, merchants who belonged to different castes, who followed different faiths, like they were Jainas, they were Buddhas, they were, indigenous different faiths groups of present-day Hinduism. So, yeah, those are the Kalinga Sadhavas.
So you've very beautifully shown us the space that Kalinga is. So what period are we talking about?
Actually, there is no such, right now we don't have a actual record of Kalinga Sadhavas being trading through a certain period of time, because as we know from our older Indic records, we sometimes lack some of those tangible records. But strong circumstantial evidence and intangible records, like, ancient Jaina texts, ancient Buddhist texts, and texts mentioned in ancient Burma, ancient Java, and all these other places. They tell us of Kalinga people having trade relations with ancient Burma, or Jaina traders and travelers going trade from Kalinga region as far back as 8th century, 7th, 8th century before Common Era. That
Okay.
means almost 2,800 years from now, before now. So nobody outside India or outside Odisha termed them as Sadhava. They just said Kalinga traders, or people from Kalinga or Kaling. But the thing is, there are records and mentions that as far back as, even like during the time, before the time of Gautam Buddha, from the time of Adi, the Parshvanath of the Jaina Tirthankaras, there is mention of traders who have gone outside Kalinga through maritime route, and also some of them have gone through the land route to Burma. So, but mainly it was the maritime route towards Southeast Asia. So these records are more substantiated into the Common Era period by the time 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th centuries after, AD or Common Era. In Javanese, ancient Javanese texts, they mention of people from Kalinga coming, and, they had the first contact with India because of Kalinga people, and they got their Shaivism because of the Kalingas were ardent devotees of Saiva faith. So if you are asking of a timeline like that, going by the records of such, texts and records, we can say safely, at least, without saying that exact date, window period between almost 8th century before Common Era till almost 13th, 14th Common Era, like 13th, 14th AD. 13th.
I would assume even after that, because I was reading a text called Chandi Mangal, which is a Bangla poem written in 16th century, and it mentions all the ports on the east coast, starting from
yes,
Tamaril going up to Simphala. So I'm assuming even if the trade was not happening in 16th century, the memory was very much alive.
absolutely, you're right. Absolutely. So why I said 13th, 14th century. After 13th, 14th century, slowly the maritime trade relations with Southeast Asia was not as strong as the heritage that was there for all these centuries before,
Okay,
because of a multiple reasons, not just
right,
because one reason,
right.
but natural
Yeah,
reasons
change
also.
is always there.
It is a lot of reasons, like man-made reasons, natural reasons, political reasons, social reasons. So
Right.
not going into depth of it,
Mhm.
but the proper, that robust trade, you could say, was
Right.
still the period of, even till the period of the Gajapati rule in Odisha.
Right.
After that, it was there, but uh, I don't find any proper records like that saying that it was still ongoing, as much as it used to be. But yes, as you said, in our folk tales, we have n number of folk tales, like infinite number of stories and folk tales, in which the Sadhavas are the main, protagonists. Sadhavas are the family of Sadhavas. So that means that memory
Very
was there.
right. And it's very interesting that you mentioned that because in the classical Sanskrit texts also, Ramayana and Mahabharata are pretty much Kshatriya texts. Then you have the whole Brahmin texts in forms of Shruti Smriti. And most of the merchant trading class stories are found in Katha Sarit Sagar, or all the short stories,
Jataka. Yes.
Jatak Kathas, or all the stories are the ones which carry the stories of the traders or the business community. And that's
Yes.
where they talk about trade, that's where they talk about ships, that's where they talk about all possible things. So that
Yes.
brings us to another element, which is the ships. you know so while these people were trading, they obviously had a very robust shipping industry and the shipbuilding and the ship sailing technology. So what do we know about that?
Yes, that's a very interesting point, because when we say that they were trading for all these centuries, we're not talking about just a furlong or a mile of water to
Right,
cross, right? Like from this end of the river, or just half a mile width of a
right.
river or something. We're talking about the
Thousands of
bay,
kilometers. Yeah,
Eastern Seas, the Bay of Bengal, right now, what it is called. In
right.
Odisha, we call it Mahodadhi even now.
Yeah.
In our texts, or our Jagannath poems and all, it is we call it
The
as
Sanskrit
Mahodadhi.
word for ocean is Mahodati.
Yeah, so it is like that is
Right.
Mahodadhi. And so the Eastern Seas, from which it's almost as if they considered like the land between this side of Indian mainland and the other side, which was the Burma Malay archipelago, like as almost like a pond in between. So they
Hmm.
had to just cross the pond, but they didn't go like straight like that. From a very, very ancient time, ancient Indians, not just the people of Kalinga, I would say that it was a common trait for any coastal people. Like,
Right.
if you see like I'm going a little off tangent just to give our viewers a little, context to it. So if you remember the recent hit movie Avatar, or
Hmm.
Avatar as we say, right? In the second part, you would say how they have brought in the new element of sea people.
Hmm.
Like the first movie was all about the hill and jungle people. The
Hmm.
second movie is about the sea people. Now that is such a beautiful analogy to how our world has always been. That
Hmm.
is like two different types of people. One are the coastal people who live near the coast, and one are the people who are in the hinterlands, or in the hilly areas or jungles, and in the more the plains and stuff. So now Indian mainland being like a subcontinent having everything, and we have such a large coastline and huge rivers, like riverine channels are also navigable riverine channels. And in a place like Kalinga, Odisha, it is actually from in centuries past, it was more difficult to do land travel because of the very impenetrable deep jungles teeming with wild beasts and all. So people actually found it more conducive to travel via waterways. So they would prefer the riverine or the oceanic, things to navigate and to trade, or even going from place to place. So because of that, like I think wherever people are, they slowly become, they evolve accordingly. So they didn't take the ocean or the such tough topographies as a challenge. They walked around it. I'm talking only about Kalinga right now, since we are talking about Kalinga. So from a long distant past, people in the Kalinga coast, they actually started experimenting and learning more about navigation. So the shipbuilding, then not just shipbuilding, the shipbuilding they did, and that too different types of ships. The ships which would survive such waters, they might have had, it must have been a trial and error method. Sometimes they would have failed, after some time they would have honed the skills and made it better, how usually things go, like in a scientific experiment. But by the time, by 8th century before Common Era, they had already honed those skills, which is because we see that Burmese textile of, they had traders from Kalinga coming there via sea. So now, what type of ships? So ships, it was not just a one sail ship, boat or a ship, and at the mercy of the sea god or the
Hmm.
elements. So they also knew they had expertise in, all the types of maritime knowledge. Like, first of all, they had great knowledge on the monsoon winds, the winds that are very typical and unique to the Indian Ocean belt, which is not found in anywhere else, like
It
Pacific
is
Ocean.
also
Or
saying they knew the elements very well.
yeah, exactly. So they knew when the winds change and which wind was conducive to go from Kalinga coast towards Southeast Asia. And they knew which was the returning winds and when to come back. Now, not just that, they knew greatly about the celestial astronomy. They could read the stars in the night and navigate. So that was a great, again, one type of a pathfinding thing. They used disha, the same disha which So we find in the seals from Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Indus-Saraswati civilization, where there is a ship shown with Dishakaka. So same thing we find with Kalinga Sadhavas also, because we have palm leaf, manuscripts where these Dishakakas are showed. Kalinga Sadhavas. What are Dishakakas? They're like land finding boats, like how we use GPS now. So you can say that the ancient GPS. So they use this Dishakakas, which in uncharted oceanic territory, they could send them and know about the land, if it is nearby or not. Then they also knew how to study oceanic flora, fauna. That means the creatures of the ocean, which part was inhabited by huge whales or any creatures that can damage a ship. They knew about the stones and the topography and the currents of the ocean, and by the color change of the water or things, they could know a lot. So what I mean is they had knowledge of every aspect of oceanic trade, like to take a
Do
ship,
we
go
have
there.
any remains of archaeological remains of those ships? I know they exist culturally in our paintings, in our stories, in our manuscripts,
Right
but
now,
any archaeological remains?
that is a question which has always actually haunted me, you can say. When I find Viking ships or, ships from the Phoenicians or on all display, once they find it, and now this question haunts me. And in the last few years, because of whatever I have read and research, and because of thankfully the technology we have now, we can access libraries and different research papers. Even like we cannot go there and find, but we can see in detail everything, we can speak to people. So because of all that, I understand now that a lot of the Kalingan coast and also the coast of the Southeast Asian lands where the Kalinga travelers traded with is not the same as it used to be all those centuries ago, because of natural causes, because of oceanic, because of the ocean level
Topographic
changing.
changes, yes.
Then there is like most of those towns or the port cities or the places which were
Mhm.
actually relevant, many of them might be, I'm telling might be because I don't have concrete evidence to it,
Yeah.
but if you think they might be underwater, like how one thing we found about Dwarka excavation, that is how a whole city and everything was found. But such underwater excavations are difficult to do. And if I hope if someday there are more and more archaeological underwater excavations, starting from the Coromandel coast, Malabar coast, Konkan coast, even to Kalinga coast, India's whole history will change,
I agree.
because
So I
we'll
did a
find so
podcast.
many.
I did a podcast with A.S. Gaurji, who was one of the archaeologists who went to Dwarka, who did
Oh,
excavation at Dwarka. So I did one podcast with him at NIU in Goa, and he kept saying that there is a lot of scope across the coast in India, and we've not even scratched the surface with Dwarka. So hopefully that will happen sometimes. So let's come back to the Sadhavas. Tell us, what did they trade?
okay. Let me show you the this thing. I have a small. I'll just like to show a few pictures that we were talking about.
Mhm.
Our viewers could have a little idea about what we're talking. So this is a phrase, this is a sculptural phrase from one of the temples in Bhubaneswar, which is now kept in the State Museum. You can see the ships, like this is one type of a ship, and then even elephants being carried on a ship. We don't have the full phrase, so we cannot know what was there. This is a phrase from Borobudur, the temple
Right.
in Java. So that is a phrase of a ship. The people from the Indian coast, that is, they say again, Javanese say that their first contact was Kalinga. So Kalinga people came to them first. So this is the Kalinga ship then, which is going to Java to trade. Then this is just a painting, a Pattachitra style of painting showing the Kalinga Sadhavas being, bon voyage by their kith and
Right.
kin.
Right.
And this is a sculptural frieze
What
at our
beautiful
Odisha
ships
State
they had.
Museum.
They had ships like this.
they had 3 to 4, 5 storied also ships, and these are all mentioned in different texts, not just our Indic folk tales or anything, but mentions from Chinese monks and travelers and other place travelers. So coming back to what they traded in, so the Kalinga region was very, very rich in natural resources. Even now, Odisha has a lot of mineral resources and other
Right.
natural resources from the forest and all. So those days, the elephants of Kalinga were like world famous, you could say, because
Mhm.
not in Odisha, yeah, in Indic texts also, like Chanakya has mentioned in
Mhm.
Arthashastra, and many foreign accounts, like from Persia, from China, from Southeast Asia, from Sinhala, Ceylon, Sri Lanka, like everywhere we find mentions of the Kalinga elephants of Kalinga, which were extremely coveted
Mhm.
for the elephants themselves also were exported. Imagine ships carrying elephants as export.
Right.
And the ivory of elephants was highly prized in the Roman market. They used to call it dosarine. So dosarina, the ivory, that was the most exclusive ivory which they used for a lot of things. So elephant and ivory products were one of the major trade things. Apart from that, a lot of diamonds, gemstones, like Ptolemy has mentioned of
Mhm.
diamonds of Kalinga
Mhm.
from the Sambalpur region, which were highly coveted in the ancient Roman markets. Pearls, different other gemstones,
Mhm.
frankincense, beeswax. These are the Gandha things, right? Frankincense and beeswax was, again, it was used in a variety of things. Even in the ancient Egypt and all, you'll find they used to trade with this. Then kingfisher feathers and textiles. Textiles are the one of the
They
most.
continue to be.
So Kalinga itself was a word for textile in ancient Tamil. Right now in modern Tamil they don't have it, but in ancient Tamil the word Kalingam meant exquisite textiles. Why? Because the exquisite textiles were woven by the Nagas of the Kalinga country, where prized imports in Pandyan territory, and the Pandyan kings did trade with the ancient Romans, and most of the riches came because of these textiles. And not just first century, I'm telling. Later on, also, there are mentions of Kalinga textiles in various ways, like in various different people's texts. And let's go back even further to Gautam Buddha's time. When Gautam Buddha attained his Mahaparinibbana, and I have read the English translation of the Mahaparinibbana Sutta from Pali to English. It's mentioned there when the people were readying the ground for laying Siddhartha, like Gautam Buddha, after his Mahaparinibbana, they strew the ground with sand and laid Kalinga and Kambala clothes on it. So that was one of the most prestigious textiles at that time, and it is named as Kalinga. So Gautam Buddha's mortal body was to be lain on that. So imagine this Kalinga name in textiles also, and this coveted textiles going back so back, and even later in the times, and even now, you and I both are wearing, Kalinga
Right.
clothes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so
So,
these were the most important things of trade. There are other things also, but
mhm.
many of these I took it from other Chinese records and foreign records, that what Odisha traded, like Kalinga traded with others.
Tell us about the ports. So maritime trade would need ports as well. So, which were the major ports? Tell us about the
Uh,
ports.
yeah, the ports of Kalinga were like um, the whole. I showed you the region of Kalinga where like it spanned all the way from the Tamralipti port all the
Mhm.
way till the Krishna and Godavari Delta, right?
Mhm.
So this is all the coastal belt of
Mhm.
present day parts of West Bengal, present day entire Odisha, and present day parts of Andhra Pradesh.
Mhm.
So if you see, I have just, this is my own like depiction of it. I just took Google Earth and took the names of different important ports that are mentioned in ancient texts and medieval texts and put it like here. So Tamralipti, which is now Tamluk in West Bengal, was one of the most important places from where Kalinga Sadhava ships used to sail to, sail to Sinhala, then all the way from here, they used to go to the other Southeast Asian nations. So Tamralipti, then till the medieval times, Balesore and Piple were important ports. Konark, Manikapatna, Pallur, Khalakatpatna, these were like from ancient times to medieval times. Pallur, Ganjam, and Paluru. So these were all like ports which we know of, which were important places. I'm not taking any this coast because this is all Coromandel coast. I'm just taking the ports of the Kalinga coast here. Now, in ancient times, even before this, before Common Era, I have not put it here. There were like Chelitalo and other ports mentioned by, ancient texts in like Periplus of the Erythraean Sea or Ptolemy's times. There is other mentions. Now here I prepared this as just as a visual for the ease of visual looking. So from Kalinga, the ships, they went to Sri Lanka or Sinhala. Then they used to go to all the other places across the Southeast Asian nations. So they used to go to Java, Bali, Sumatra, even ancient China, they used to go Cambodia, this entire ancient Cambodia, Khmer regions. They used to go to Burma. So these were the voyages of the Kalinga Sadhavas from the ports of Kalinga.
Great. So now I know there is a festival that still celebrates the maritime heritage of Kalinga, which is called Boita Bandana. And I have been fortunate enough to see it from the Bali coast. So I happened to be in Bali on the Kartik Purnima day, and I saw people actually standing in a row uh, on the coast and leaving boats in the water. And I know that the same thing or a similar thing is done even today in Odisha, Boita Bandana. So tell us about this festival, which is so much associated with Sadhavas.
I'm so glad that you actually saw it from the Bali coast. Like we have not been, most of the Odias have not been fortunate to see that from another coast. Max to max, I have heard friends seeing it from Thailand, from the Lao
Yeah,
Prathong festival. But Bali coast is very special again because the
because it's
name
called Balijatra as
Balijatra,
well.
yes, the Bali Jatra, because the day of Kartika Purnima in Odisha, apart from other rituals associated with the Kartika month, for Odiyas, the most important aspect of the morning of Kartika Purnima is a heritage festival, where we Odiyas, wherever we live, doesn't matter, even if we're not in Odisha and we are outside, we commemorate that day by floating a little boat. Usually, traditionally, it is made with banana stem, cork sole, and all that. But if we don't have access to that, I just make a little paper boat and put it in our bathtub or, any nearby body of water. So in Orissa, you will find any water body, ponds, lakes, rivers, the sea, everywhere people flocking there early in the morning and floating a little boat laden with few things like flowers, fruits, incense sticks, betel nuts like supari jota.
All the
So
auspicious things.
all auspicious things, and they say a certain, and there is the chanting of the hula huli, the ululation sound, the shankha, and there is a very few special words which are spoken. A, ka, ma, boy, pana, gua, thoi, and then there are a few more lines after that. Now, a, ka, ma, boy are acronyms. A is like these are the names of certain months in our Hindu calendar. So months which were very important to this maritime history of Orissa. So Panno Guathoi means they're putting panno, that is betel leaf and betel nut. And there are lines after that, there are a few lines. So I'm not going into the details of that. So now what does it commemorate? Does that commemorate some religious thing or some other, superstition? No, that is the day we are trying to remember that past memory of when our ancestors of Kalinga, they used to sail from the Kalingan ports all the way to different parts of Southeast Asia for trade. because that exact time of the year was conducive to sailing from the Kalingan coast towards the other sides of Bay of Bengal.
That's when the winds
That's
changed.
yes. So that is commemorated every single year on Kartika Purnima Day. Now, how special is that? Many Odiyas might have forgotten why they do it. Like they do it, they know that okay, we had Sadhava Boitas going, or Balijatra, the name as it is, Donga Bhasa. Now, Donga Bhasa ritual is Donga, the word in Odia, Donga in colloquial Odia, Donga is a boat or a ship. And Boita Bandana. So Donga Bhasa is the name for that ritual. Boita Bandana is also the name for that ritual. Boita is from the Sanskritized word, which means a ship, and the Sadhava ships were called Boita. Now, what is Bandana? Bandana means the Vandapana that we do before any auspicious ritual. So the family, the ladies and the other family members and the kith and kin of the Sadhavas who were venturing into their maritime voyage were given Bandapana and sent off with all good wishes. So Danga Bhasa, floating the boat. Boita Bandana is that doing Bandapana, but the boat. And Balijatra. Balijatra means voyaging to Bali, all the shores of Bali. It's Bali is just a name, one name. They just didn't go to only Bali. They went to other places, but that's how the name has stuck. So this particular festival is a heritage festival, and in Odisha we celebrate. Let me just show you a little picture I kept in the slideshow for our viewers. So this is how those little boats look,
Pretty
and
much similar to how you see in Thailand today, more
so that also
prominently.
I have kept it here. You see, this is the Odisha's Kartika Purnima festival. This is Lao Krathong in Thailand. This is Bonla Hoifai in Laos. This is Thandin Gyutin in Burma, that is present in Myanmar. This is Masakapam Kepesi. I'm pretty sure that's what you would have seen in Bali.
Right.
And this is in Cambodia, they have Bonam Tuk and Bondet Pratip. Bondet Pratip is the word for Pradipa. Pradip se
You know,
Pratip.
yeah, Pradeep. So what you show me from Cambodia is something very similar I've seen in Goa.
So this one, when I had made, I was actually not aware of the beautiful festival of Goa. And thanks to you, again, see, we learn as we go, and because of,
Right. I've seen it in
so
Goa, and then when you see it in Kashi, when you see they call it Dev Dipali, but it's the
they,
same day of Kartik Purnima. So there is a concept, a lot of our scriptures also mention Dev Dipavali,
yes,
or the month of Kartika itself is,
yes,
you're supposed to do Deep Dan. So
yes,
these are so who do you do Deep Dan to? The most auspicious thing around you, and most
yes,
auspicious things are the water bodies. So you do
yes,
Deep Dan in water bodies. So even Kashi looks beautiful on that day. I was fortunate to attend one Dev Deepavali in Kashi, and the whole ghats are lit up, and but that's a modern thing to do. The lighting up of ghats is pretty much a modern thing. But what is important is the Deep Dan on Kartik Purnima.
yeah. So,
Which is done across the country. Which is done across the country. I was
absolutely.
surprised when I saw it happening in Delhi in a small ancient temple. People quietly come and do Deep Dan for the whole of month of Kartik. So
So,
it's pretty much done across the country.
yeah, what you were saying, that's why I just want to like add a little extra. As I started at the beginning when I was talking about Kartik Purnima, like apart from everything else associated with the auspicious month of Kartik, in Odisha, this particular festival we associate with our heritage, just the floating Donga Bhasa.
Right.
It's not, Dev Deepavali is done in Jagannath temple and other temples and all also, but this particular Donga Bhasa festival, it's more of that heritage based. And what I showed you here,
Mhm.
especially the Lao Krathong and Bonla Hofai and all,
Mhm.
they associated with the Buddhist past now, but
Mhm.
the most fascinating part, I'm not saying that exactly it might be, but the
Mhm.
fascinating part is this all happened on the full moon day of Kartika in all these places.
Right.
Like what we say in Kartik in Indian calendar system, even in the ancient Buddhist calendar systems also, the month names are more or less the
You have
same.
to understand Buddhism was Buddhism was not really a separate religion to begin with,
These
right?
are
And they
indigenous.
still follow the same calendar, so
Exactly.
that's why the Buddha Purnima happens on a Purnima.
Exactly. So the thing is, how uncanny is that the same time of the year and with the same concept, they're floating that boat with, again, they also put that little lamp and offerings like coins and other, things, and they send it off. And the Bali thing, what you said, I have read from, there some of the research papers. One IG Falgunandi was there who had done a lot of Kalinga Bali related things during the 1970s, 80s from his, because this is now not a very, what do you say, common festival anymore. Like in Odisha, it is common, but Bali, it is now very specific. So from the 1970s, 80s time when he had come to Odisha and studied all that, he had written about this festival in detail, which was actually mentioned by Sushma Swaraj also when she was alive and she came and she had given a nice lecture, address about our heritage. So this particular thing he has mentioned, IG Falgunandi, that they did it in memory of their ancestors who are in that other land, in the land of Kalinga, and they send a little remembrance for that voyage when they came and all. So somehow we lose all these little connections in between, and but the connections are there. We have to just go
Yeah,
and
I'm
find them.
bringing you back to the festival. So you say on a Kartik Purnima early morning, you do, you put all these things in a boat and you float it. Is there
Yeah.
anything else that is done on Kartik Purnima?
The usual things like Kartika, the whole month we
Is auspicious.
it is a very auspicious month. Many people like Odisha is a like fish is like vegetable in Odisha.
Hmm.
Fish eating, fish is so common. So, but in Odisha during Kartika month, most of the people don't consume any fish. Now on Mondays, it's like complete sattvic
Hmm.
bhojan, like without any no oil is used, like ghee will be used, no onions and garlic will be used. And especially women folk, like old elderly women folk, they perform habisha. Now, Habisha is a thing where they have that entire Kartika Vrata Katha read, and most of them go to Puri or other such holy places. And for them, that is more with the Vaishnavism part of it. It is associated. They eat a specific type of Habisha dalma that time, which doesn't have any spices or anything, no, not even turmeric, and they just consume only once, before sunset. And also those other aspects about Kartika month, even giving the Deepa, diya, lamps and all, and Dana, like
So
you give
let's
that.
come back to the Sadhabas. So they left India or the Kalinga coast around Kartik Purnima. And when did they return? And are there any festivals associated with that?
Yes, that is actually, that is a very interesting question. So this was again like how the Sadhavas went to different places. And so let me go to show you this one. This another very quaint festival. It's not a festival, but it's more of a vrat, you can say, or in Odia we call Osa.
Mhm.
Osa is a colloquial term where ladies or girls or females do certain rituals weekly or in a cyclic manner for a certain amount of time. So this particular Osa is called Khuduru Kuni Osa or Bhalu Kuni Osa. So Khuduru Kuni, this is written in Odia here. This is a book for that Osha. I just took the picture of that book. So Khuduru Kuni or Bhalukuni. Now, is this a goddess? Yes, that is a form of goddess Mangala. Mangala is the patron goddess of the indigenous communities of the local people who lived in the Kalinga coast, who considered her as the protectress against any dangers of the sea. So the Odia term for the boats, the ship's hull is called Manga. So the goddess who was kept at the hull of the ship was the Mangala. She was the protectress goddess for these indigenous communities of Sadhavas or the seafaring people. Now, this Kudrukudi Osa, why are they worshipping Mangala and why only girls? These are all girls. So after marriage, we don't like. I am also from this community where we used to have Kudurukuni. Before I was married, I used to do. It is on the Sundays of the Bhadra month. So only on the Sundays of Bhadra month this is done. So the girls, they all congregate and it is done together, as a group. They'll do it, they'll read the book. And what is the story in this book? Why I give all this preface is to come to the story. Now, the main protagonist of this book, her name is Taopoi. She's a girl who comes from a Sadhava family, a Kalinga Sadhava family, whose brothers have gone off to trade into the far off lands of Bali and Java, Sumatra, all those Southeast Asian places. So her dad used to be a very rich Sadhava merchant, but after he died, her brothers took over the trade and they go off. So now some things happen in the story, and how our Indian story, any story goes in the world. There are lots of adventure and emotion and good, bad happening. But why this particular Osa is done? Because this is the type of puja that Taupui did to worship goddess Mangala or Bhalukuni, because she made a mound on the Balunka. Bhalukuni comes from the word Balunka. Balunka means the sand, the little sand, mounds. So because she didn't have any money at that point of her life, she didn't have any resources, any money. So she just made little mounds in the sand and put flowers and any offerings like khuda. That's why kudurukuni. Khuda is the grounded rice, the rice which is not consumed, which is not inferior type of thing, which is given to others. So that time, because she didn't have any other things, she worshipped with khuda and to the Bhalukuni for praying that her brothers come back safely, that the ships don't have any problems, so they can come and they can save her. And for the story, for her, this thing, she was worshipping Ma Mangala for her brother's safe return from the choppy seas and the dangers at the sea. Now, this particular Osa is done even now. Even now in Odisha, in the coastal belts, in this particular communities, we do this. And why we do that at that particular time? Because that is the time when the Sadhu ships used to return back to their home. So they went in Kartika, and after almost 9-10 months, they could come back. And this time, how beautifully it is, we woven into this story. The story is with all its other, exciting adventures and stuff. The main thing is like this particular time, we still commemorate when the Sadhavas were coming back. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, yes. So it's a
So,
full cycle. So, apart from the trading cycle that you have of the product you have to sell, the market you have to serve, you also have a cycle which is very well tied with the trade winds, as we say, you know.
yes,
And when you're leaving, I'm assuming that it would have been, there would have been a substantial risk associated with it.
absolutely.
So that's why the worship comes in, the auspicious rituals come in, so that your journey is without obstacles. And then when
Mhm.
you are there, I mean, assuming that there was no contact once your family members have traveled, you literally have no contact. So all you could do was to pray to your guardian deity,
Mhm.
your rakshak devata, to say that please bring my brothers, my father, all the members of my family who are traveling,
Yes,
bring them back. Because
yes,
that's the time you're waiting for them to return. And
yes,
that's the only time you'll come to know if they are going to return or not, or if they are safe
absolutely.
or not, or if they had
Yes,
a good trade or not. That
yeah.
also. If were they able to sell everything they took? Did they make profit? Because profit means you'll have a good life. If and business losses meant you are not going to have a good life. So a
Mhm.
lot of those elements, I guess, played, and people who are waiting behind have only one way to reach out to you, and that is through the gods. Uh,
You have put it so beautifully and so perfectly, Anuradhaji. Like that's what it was.
right,
Because now we take everything for granted. Like we just pick up our smartphones and we FaceTime or we do a
right,
WhatsApp video call. But
right.
imagine like even 100 years ago was not that thing. Even
Even 20 years
30
ago.
years ago, even 30 years ago, people used to wait for a letter or something. But
Right,
it's Sadhava's time, not even letters. So how you put beautifully that
right,
the families knew that now they are going, they'll be back around that time. So
right.
that was the time they were like putting all their positive vibes into they were sending it to the universe to bring their loved ones back.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
there was absolutely a lot of risk because, again, going back to ancient Jaina and Buddha tales, you would see what all dangers of the sea are mentioned. Like if you read those texts, um, as I said, these are the indigenous local people who worship Mangala. Now, what did the Buddhist people do? They worship goddess Tara and Avalokitaswara.
Hmm.
Goddess Tara, if you find, go to Odisha's Ratnagiri, Lalitgiri, Udayagiri,
I've been there, yeah.
Buddhist complex, you find beautiful sculptures of Goddess Tara. Not just there, you will find it in Maharashtra caves of, different Buddhist caves. I'm talking about Kalinga, Odisha. So I'm just focusing on the Odissan sculptures. So goddess Tara is the protectress goddess of the seafaring communities. So what all she protects the people from is in the sculpture. It's all like depicted on the sides, and one of that is from the dangers of the sea. So there was like not only Tamralipti. Forgot to mention about Chilika. Chilika Lake today, that was actually the gateway to Southeast Asia. Right now, it's a small lake, but centuries ago, the topography was totally different. And there have been lots of research on that. And there are great research papers by Sila Tripathi and all which are available, who was like, he worked with the Maritime Research Institute in India somewhere, and great research papers, especially with Chilika Lake's importance in Southeast Asian trade.
Hmm.
So, if you see Chilika Lake, and then again down below the Ganjam, when I had showed in the map, the Rushikulya River's mouth is that point of time. That point in the map. So there in the Rushikulya, near the Rushikulya River, on the little hill, there is a temple even now. It's called a Shakti Pit of Tara Tarini
I was
in
about to
Ganjam.
ask you about
If you have
Taratari.
gone there, you would
I've
know
not
there are
yet.
two goddesses. So Tara Tarini, at present day, we feel it's a Shakti Peeth, but it is a beautiful evolution of Odisha's past. How Tara is the Buddhist goddess, and Tarini is the indigenous goddess. Now it is worshipped as Tara Tarini. So when the Sadhava ships used to sail on the Rishikulya, right next to that hill where the little temple or the goddesses are there, they used to pray for their. I'm getting goosebumps when I'm saying this because I'm trying to reimagine that, visualize that in my head, all those ships sailing in that river going towards the mouth of Chilika and then to the ocean, not Chilika, to the ocean straight from there to
Right.
the Bay of Bengal, what we call now. So they used to pray to their god and go, like, as you said, to pray that please God, let's have Ma Tara or Ma Tarani,
That's
let give us a safe voyage, give us a good trade. Like first voyage has to be safe, then a good trade, then again safe voyage home.
In fact, it's
So
very interesting. Across the coast of India, we have these goddesses. Like in Tamil Nadu, in the down south, you have Mani Mekhalai Devi,
yes,
who is the this thing in Gujarat also. She's called something. I'm forgetting the name, but I have it somewhere noted down. There is a Devi who is the protector of the ships. So there is
and
it can be a
you also
complete
mentioned Mangalore's name is from Mangala, right?
Mangalore's name is from Bangalore. Yes,
And Mangala is supposed to be the protectress goddess of
ships.
the ship of the ships.
Yes. So
So
there are lots of I mean that in itself can be a research topic. The
yes.
protective deities of the traders.
So if
So
someone is listening to us who has like, you can do
yeah,
multiple
I always say if
research.
nobody is doing it, we'll have to do it. But I hope somebody picks it up and does. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's very very interesting that these communities have, and the beautiful part is that we continue to celebrate it. We've lost maritime trade. We really don't have any big ports or as big ports on the Kalinga coast right now, if I'm not wrong. So, but we still continue to keep that memory alive. And my belief is, and this is my personal belief, that these festivals and rituals keep the memory alive so that you can recreate it.
Yeah.
So that that our ancestors could do it in the past, so we can potentially recreate it, and hopefully we'll be worthy descendants of our ancestors and we'll do it. So,
In Kalinga, actually, right now, the port which is there, the port of Paradip, it's not an ancient port,
hmm.
but thankfully, it has also become a bustling port and a great point of trade and everything. It's a more relatively very newer port. Any of the old ports are not there, as you say. But yes, we have to revive the ancient heritage, like we have to revive the memories of that. Unless we revive the memories, that confidence on ourselves will not be there, because
For me, it
generations
is
of
more
Odias,
important. For me, it is more important that we take inspiration from that and design our
exactly.
future.
Yeah,
So we take inspiration from the excellence of our ancestors and design our future.
I was like almost going to like we like totally echo your thoughts here, Anadaji, because generations of Odia grew up with a, I would say, inferiority complex, that we are like just like how Indians were made to believe that we don't have anything, substantial from our heritage, or everything was given to us in aesthetics or technology, or like somehow or the other we were made to believe that for a number of centuries. And same story about Odias, like somehow it was systemically and certainly and passive
That's
aggressively.
okay. These are cyclic things. It's
So,
our own
but
agyan.
now it is time to, because the thing is to find these things, we're not able to find it in our own records and all, but to find these similarities, to find these this presence, the name, the glories. So it should inspire our younger generation to build upon on it, like to think that yes, that there is a lot of things which should be done apart from all that. And if Raja Bhoj, the great Raja Bhoj during those times, who was a polymath, like he had so many different abilities. In his Yukti Kalpataru, he has mentioned about the brilliance of the Kalinga ships and all, like our folk tales, because folk tales should be again a very rich inspiration. We should not think that they are just heresies. Folk tales are the tales people pass from one generation to the other. So if our folk tales are rich in all this, our folk art, craft, all these are rich in this, and we see similarities. Like, can I show you that? Can I show our viewers that similarity that I was
Yeah,
telling you? Remember, like this is not a conclusive thing, but this is again a thing which makes sense to me, I would say. Like we see these echoes around the Southeast Asian belt. This is traditional filigree work from Odisha. We call it Tarakasi. Tarakasi work is silver gold filigree from Cuttack. You would find even in the Durga Puja pandals, jewelry of Tarakasi adorned by goddess Durga and the Odissi dancers, and in different other things you will see Tarakasi. Now, exactly the same type of filigree work
I
you would
have the
find.
same brooch, Preeta. The way that you put, I have the same brooch, and I got it from Indonesia.
So this one, I have the
Yeah,
same one too. This one started my journey, into learning more and more. I also have this same, little lotus brooch, which I
right.
thought that it was Tarakasi, but it was not. It was Kendari work from.
No, it is the
Uh,
same work. It's the same work. We don't know if it traveled from here to there or there to here, but it's
no, from
exactly
wherever
the
it
same work.
traveled, we don't know, but this uncanny similarity shows a
It is
cultural
absolutely.
tie, a
Yes.
socio-cultural tie. The similarities in ikat, the bandha that we call in Odisha, and the Indian Ikat regions and in all Southeast Asian, the type of patterns and all, it shows a cultural tie. I'm talking about a
Right.
cultural connect, a
See, I
socio-cultural.
always say, Preeta, that traders are also the carriers of culture.
They are the, what do you call, the stevedores of commodities and culture.
Yeah.
So especially Kalinga Sadhavas, this Kalinga presence in all of Southeast Asia was so organic, holistic. It was not thrust upon, it was not done with force or anything. It was such a beautiful process of interconnection and, exchanges that
Yeah, true, true, true. And
I want
and
to show another little thing I
sure.
recently thought about. Like, this is a memory from childhood. These were little bugs you'd find, on the grass, little red color bugs, and the name is Sadhava Bohu. Imagine our like some whenever our ancestors must have named it as Sadhava Bohu. Bohu means a bride, or a not a bride,
Bahu,
but a, yeah, bride of a Sadhava family, or like a
Bahu.
daughter-in-law, right?
It's like Bahu.
So imagine that a, a little bug is also named as Sadhava Bohu because of its bright red coloring, how they used to wear these bright saris and something. So there is a name of an insect also which is given to the name Sadhava. So Sadhava is there in our culture. We have to just, in Odia culture, I mean, in Kalinga, ancient Kalinga culture. And I feel ancient Kalinga right now, only the Odisha people somehow have kept that that identity still with us. But I would say that apart from, as I said in the beginning, political boundaries can change, the rulers can change, everything changes, how we see in current times, like the government changes. But people who do trade and commerce and other day-to-day activities, they're the same, right? And the rulers or the government and all might make something easier or more difficult because of that, but otherwise the things will keep going on, right? So the Sadhavas in the entire Kalinga coast, irrespective of the change in regime or the change in political boundaries, they thought they belong to the Kalinga identity. Now Kalinga was all this area, So somehow the other portions, they have somehow totally erased of their Kalinga identity. They have just kept their current regional identity as their identity. I'm not like, here we have to embrace our past, like, to, if we want to research more on a certain aspect, or how India got to be here, or how our Bharatvarsh is more rich and vibrant, then we have to look beyond political boundaries or political conquests, and see how a people, how a nation of people, how they have survived, or how they have gone on. Like, does that make sense? Or
Yeah, it does. It does. It does. Great, Preeta. That was a great session on Sadhavas, and I am sure we are richer in our knowledge about Kalinga. And I'm sure we'll come back to you for more sessions on different aspects of Kalinga. And I know you are a wealth of information on Kalinga. And I hope to see your book soon in the market so that we can all read it and get enriched. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming.
thank you, Radhaji. Thank you so much for having me and giving me this time. And, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on Detours. You can also join us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Our handle is IndiTales, IndiTales. See you soon.